Today, we're going to explore one of the most unique and debated parts of Canada's Constitution, a topic I'm often asked to make a video about, the Notwithstanding Clause, also known as Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Sounds complicated. It is a little complicated, but by the end of this lesson, you'll understand exactly what it does, why it exists, and of course, the fun part, why people argue about it. So stick around and let's learn something. Let's start with the basics. In 1982, Canada added the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to the Constitution. This charter protects your rights and freedoms, like the freedom of expression, like your equality rights, your legal rights, your mobility rights. Now, normally, the government has to follow the charter. They must follow the charter. If they pass a law that violates your rights, the courts can step in and say, no, I don't think so. This breaks the rules. That's how a constitutional democracy works. Government power is limited and people's rights come first. But Section 33 introduces something a little bit unusual. It's an override switch. Imagine the charter as part of a massive rule book. Hidden inside it is a switch, the Notwithstanding Clause. The government can flip this switch under special circumstances. If a government uses this clause, it's basically saying, yeah, we know this law goes against certain charter rights, but we're going to apply it anyway. The law still takes effect even if a court decides that it violates those rights. It's extremely rare and it's uniquely Canadian. It's important to remember that the Notwithstanding Clause does not let governments override the entire charter. Only certain sections can be overridden, overrided. Section 2, your fundamental freedoms. Sections 7 to 14, your legal rights. And Section 15, your equality rights. These include things like your freedom of expression, protection against unreasonable search and seizure, and the right to equality. But some rights are always completely protected no matter what. So the government cannot override sections 3 to 5, which are your democratic rights, like your right to vote. They can't override section 6, which are your mobility rights, your right to move and live anywhere in Canada. And they can't override your sections 16 to 23, the language rights, like using French and English in school. These are off limits no matter what. Now, another key part. If a government uses the Notwithstanding Clause, it only lasts up to 5 years. After that, they must either end the override or they have to publicly renew it. This 5-year limit connects to the election cycle. It forces government to face voters if they use the clause in a way people disagree with. It's like the Constitution saying, okay, you can override rights, but only temporarily and only if you're willing to answer to the public. To understand why Section 33 was included, you need to go back all the way to 1982. When Canada was patriating the Constitution, some provincial governments were worried about courts gaining too much power. They wanted a way for elected governments, not judges, to have the final say in certain rare situations. So, Section 33 was a part of a political compromise. It tries to balance the ideas of protecting individual rights and the idea of protecting the ability of elected democratic governments to make decisions. Whether it succeeds is something that Canadians still debate today. So let's imagine a province passes a new law. The courts look at it and say, yeah, no, this law limits people's freedom of expression. It violates the charter. Now, normally, that law would be struck down. But if the government believes a law is still necessary, it can pass it using the Notwithstanding Clause. Nothing is hidden. It must be explicit and visible. It must state clearly in the law, this law applies notwithstanding Section 2 of the Charter, for example. Now, while you might hear about this clause in the news, it's important to understand that different governments, both provincial and federal, across the political spectrum, have used or attempted to use it. Quebec used it after the charter was created, and Saskatchewan and Alberta used it in a labor dispute. Other provinces even considered using it for education, labor, or public safety laws. You don't need the political details to understand the key point. It's a tool that any government can use, but doing so usually sparks major public debate. The Notwithstanding Clause is one of the most argued about parts of Canadian law. Some people say this clause protects democracy. Courts shouldn't have the final say on everything. Others say this clause is dangerous. It lets government ignore people's rights. And you know what? Both sides raise valid points. It really comes down to how you think power should be balanced between the courts, which are there to protect rights, and the legislatures and parliament, which is elected by the people. And that's why it continues to make headlines and it continues to add to debates. So here's what you should remember. The Notwithstanding Clause is a special tool that lets governments override certain charter rights, only temporarily though, and only if they admit it publicly and are willing to face the voters for it. It's a powerful option, but it's also very risky. And that's exactly why it exists in a democratic system. Understanding the Notwithstanding Clause helps you understand how Canada balances rights, democracy, and the limits of government power. Yeah, it's complicated, but at its core, it's about who gets the final say and when. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something.